produce. We've had a miserable series of crops this year, all the way through our non-existent spring, and then we hit a reasonably hot period, and everything is wilting, and a lot of plants are showing damage from the sudden burst of heat. So this level of solar activity can be expected to increase. Patrick Garrell's intensity numbers seem well placed, if slightly off, and I have a variant factor that would explain that. If we wanted to divert there for a minute, it's an issue of, as the sun continues to wind up in the final days, each of the windings take longer to do because there's so much more tension within the mass itself, very much as though we were trying to wind a string around a top and increasingly applied more tension as we went along. And so that's what accounts for the shift in it. And yes, I expect in October we're going to get really hit down.
And I was assuming, because of analyzing, I think I sent you an email on it, I noticed that the X-flares happened in between the Patrick Garrell cycles. So obviously between January 18th and April 15th, the X-flares happened in mid-February, and the same thing here. So do you think it's more likely that the big X-flares happen in the middle of the cycle as opposed to at the end of the cycle itself?
Oh, certainly. We've known that since August 1 of 2010, where we had that screwiness on the sun, and then had a series of flares about 18 or 20 days later that began at that point. So I agree with you. That is indeed an accurate observation. I think also, though, that if we look at the plot on that we're seeing a slight increase in the length of the time of the cycle. So it may not actually work out that it's going to be October 25 or 26 this year. It may be November 1 or 2, and we have the second of our crashcades is in early November. That's the one that's more terror associated than the other two. It may be a masking issue, though, the way we had with the Peterson quake sort of masking the larger Sumatran tsunami that particular year. And I can't really differentiate at this point. We'll know more by our September 1 report, which will sort of give us a heads up.
Fantastic.
Hi, Cliff. This is Chipper Dog. I would be really curious to know if the frequencies of the light that the sun is sending and we're receiving are changing due to those winding magnetics you were just talking about, or some other set of causes.
I can't say that the winding itself is obviously going to alter the way in which photons are released from the sun, but there may be an underlying cause that is perhaps more pronounced. That's being magnified by the windings, because we know now that there's 4 interior spheres to the sun that are noticeable in terms of how we can track the various internal movements. And the photonic band appears to come from the second one down, which I don't know that that's going to be impacted directly by the winding. But nonetheless, the actinic rays are way up, and the plants are burning, and skin cancer rates are escalating. But we also see a new archetype coming out where we're going to start seeing sun protective features in clothing, and they'll start selling those and saying super lightweight, you won't sweat, but hey, look at this, SPF 12,000 or something.
Kind of like that old Ray-Ban commercial with the robes and the sunglasses.
Indeed, yes, exactly, yeah. All updated, of course, but yeah.
It's almost like they were telling us right then in that one commercial what was happening.
Hey, look way back. There's this weird, or not weird, there is a very strange imprint that's been put into a commercial series that was carried for year after year, and even at the detriment, even at the cost of not increasing sales. And it was for these transition lenses, these right. Polychromatic plastic lenses that change with intensity of photons.
Right.
And if you'll notice...
You can get those for your cataract surgery if you want.
No, I'd rather not even discuss that. But I mean, George is affected that way. But my point is, if you look at those commercials way back when, they're talking about clothing that changed relative to the intensity of the sun, and you see people going out in the commercial outside their little protective hives, and all of their clothing and everything changing to reflect the sunlight, and how the sun is so intense and everything is hugely white, and it wasn't a yellow sun at all. And those ads appeared way back when, so they've been telling us for years that this was coming.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Diane VG.
Hi, Cliff.
Hello.
question I have is, does the data still have 2 large earthquakes in North America for the middle of August, possibly around the 18th?
I think 17th and 18th and 19th is when I'm expecting it, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Don't like that. You know, it's it's not a good thing in the sense it's going to cause some disruption, and I expect a lot of problems from one of the earthquakes relative to the bridges, because the other temporal markers that were part of that chain have already fallen, so we're just waiting for that rather expectantly. And poor old Igor is chewing his mustache right off. He's up in earthquake country at the moment in Alaska.
It's like one of them was supposed to affect the middle of America, basically cut us off from one side, at least what I've...
Correct. But we could have misread that in the sense it may not be east-west, it might be north-south. So it might be an earthquake that separates a major north-south artery, which would slice the part of the America in half. So it could be the eastern corridor north-south, could be a western corridor north-south, or a central corridor north-south that could be affected.
Well, that's different. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Cliff,
by the way,
I'd like to ask a follow-up question on that sun issue. In the reports, you've got data going to people who are not afraid of the sun and even embrace its energy. Are these people muckers? How are they able to soak
No, these individuals... Sorry, I'm just... I get all whipped up about this particular subject because it's really cool. But the indications we had for that subset are more greatly supported in the Terra entity and in the Space Goat Fart entity than any of the others, but they have a presence in America, or in Populous USA and Global Pop, and also in Future Pop. And in Future Pop, these guys were something of a healer class, not physicians by any means at all, but if you will, vibratory templates. No, the individuals are described as being able to, or being exceptional. So we're talking about people that would be, say, standout, one in a million kind of an individual thing, maybe even one in several millions. And these people are able to exhibit the city. And I think that this is, I've done some research on it recently and gone back and read in the Science of Yoga, and indeed there is one where there are people that can basically be described as energetic batteries. They sit around... There you go. But they're able to pass it on to other beings. So they sit there and, if you will, concentrate the solar key force, and then they go about dropping it on those people that need it and brightening their day.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's exciting. So they're not muckers.
No, these are. It's at the same level of disruption to the social order, though. And the powers that be actually would support the muckers a lot more than these individuals, because it's going to blow a whole lot of theories of how the universe works right out of the woodwork, I think.
Oh, great! Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Chipper. And by the way, I'm a bit suspicious now. Cliff, you've been saying for the last 3 months Igor's been chewing his mustache off. I'm surprised he's still got some mustache on.
No, you'd have to know his lineage. He's one of those guys that he's Germanic in his roots, and he has that sort of short, bristly, almost reddish hair, but not quite. So no, it's tough stuff. I'm surprised myself. His teeth will probably give out first.
Okay, too much information. Passing over to Green Meadow.
Hi there.
Hello.
More and more it seems that many of the forecasts have language fulfillment, and then in the following years the same forecast is fulfilled again but larger. For example, the summer of howl and flooding. Can you tell when something is a pre-echo and will swing around again more intensely?
A little bit more now than in past. It's a very difficult call to make because there is a general trend to always have certain mega sets continuing to gain data, partially because we can't throw out enough. So for instance, there will always be people out there that have a fundamentalist view of the planet, will, even in the best of times, will be out spewing that the world is ending. And so we will always collect doom and gloom data that the world's going to end, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that set is always active. That has a tendency to obscure the larger growth of these sets. So we don't see them in profile, if you will. We see them end on. And so we look and we see a tube of 4 inches in diameter, and we can't really tell that there's a smaller tube 2 inches in diameter that's within our view because we're looking down the hole from both tubes. Make any sense at all?
Okay, yeah, actually it does. I think we're all still trying to figure out how to read your work, including you probably.
Oh, correct. We're having to cope with new conditions constantly. So the fact that we've gotten anywhere close to where we're at is really staggering. I never thought it would be this successful.
I'm pretty amazed by it. I think it's wonderful. Can you tell us what you expect for each crashing peak?
I can't really. I can tell you that the crashcade in the middle, which we think is associated with the early part of November, just slightly prior to the 12th, so it'd be like the 11th and the 12th. We know that one has more of a Terra entity and a space goat farts association, which brings in the unknown energies from space, as well as the sun, than any of the others. But and coincidentally, we have that whole Elenin business in October, so the emotional peak of that in early November sort of might make sense in a screwy way. I haven't really wrapped my head around that, but that's the only one that we have any real definition for, other than we have a preponderance of nasty financial and nasty political language in the December crashcade. The October crashcade has an ever so slightly larger amount of financial information involved in it than otherwise, but the period of time that it takes us to descend from the emotional peak to the emotional floor is so short that there is there's just not a lot of data in the transition period of time. It's unlike the period of time when we went into 63 days of release language, which was a continuing trend that we could see a number of years even out. What we have here is a real straight, sudden drop-off. So I don't know what that means, but it's worrisome that we're in this particular point of the financial system. So if I had to say we were going to face a crisis, I would lay it out and say, okay, my monkey mind could see equity crises on a massive scale in October, followed by bond crises of unparalleled nature early November, and the bond market being hugely larger than the equity market, and all the gold and other thing markets brings down the petrodollar, and we have a political crisis that might involve rioting of those people that are politically afflicted in early December. That's probably the best sort of a description I can give you in terms of, but that's monkey mind. It could just as easily be, in October we get a brush by of something that we think is sentiently controlled, and that brings out the crash of the church in October, and it exposes all of the corruption of the global elite, and that initiates the financial crisis in November, and we see the global revolution in the mass hangings and the murders of the formerly oppressors in early December. Those are the kinds of intensity values we have.
Okay. Can you give like a percentage of how much something is Terra and how much something is markets?
Relative to the totality, I can give you some indication, yes. You have to understand that we start off with a background of zero, of neutral for these values. And so it's not as though everything that contributes to a set provides impetus up or down. So they may conflict with each other. So for instance, some of the sets within the space goat farts might bring in a negative intensity. They're laid back, so to speak. Others bring in a positive intensity. So just the fact that the space goat fart is itself predominant in a set is not